The other week, I was working quite a lot, enjoying parts of it and dreading others. But after a particularly challenging day, I found myself wondering what the meaning of all this was. Why am I pursuing a degree? Why do I work multiple jobs? I'm enduring quite a lot of stress, and I'm not sure what for exactly. Well, people rarely find meaning in work, I then thought. I thought about how people who are interviewed before their death, about their regrets, they never mention anything about wanting to spend more time working. They usually talk about friends and family and living for themselves, so perhaps I'm doing all of this for the enjoyment of other people and for love. But then I thought about how much pain I've endured at the hands of people who loved me, and how pointless that felt as well. Even in my pain-free relationships, I have felt it all pointless at times, and I figured that can't be it either. And then I thought, should I kill myself, or should I make another cup of coffee? Most of the time, we tend to be too caught up in life's daily challenges to question anything besides what will be our next step and what will we have for dinner. But then sometimes when you're in the shower, or when it feels particularly hard to get out of bed in the morning, or when 5 rich people die in a submarine, we stop to wonder, wait, what is the point of all of this? And unless you've been given a clear meaning by a god, then answering that question is an experience that usually results in not a lot of answers. You may find some solace in existentialism, where it's your existence and the meaning that you give it that gives your life meaning. And I did for a while as well. After all, it's a very bootstrappy solution to a universal experience of life, and bootstrapping, as we all know, is appealing because it will tell you that you're actually in control and you can pull yourself out of the depths of meaningless all on your own. Or at least it can make you feel that that's something you're capable of, and we can at very least cling on to that belief in our moments of despair. But I don't know about you, but I've set all kinds of goals for myself. I've read one too many self-help books in my youth, and I've been committed to living the best life. And in my experience, there was indeed freedom to be found in existentialism, but the freedom was more than anything a freedom from other people and society and belief systems that have their own very clear-cut idea of what a good life should look like. I didn't find much freedom, however, from that dread of existence. The question of meaning and the uselessness of it all kept returning for me, regardless of how much meaning that I ascribed to my own life. So, is there a better solution here? Are there other answers? Because naturally, the conclusion that I reach is that suicide is very much an option. Or at least it's an important option to consider, because what's the point of all this suffering that is life, right? When there's not a heaven at the end of your self-flagellation, and there's no exit to nirvana out of the eternal cycle of suffering that is life, and there's no earthly way either of living that avoids suffering, then why wouldn't you kill yourself? And I swear I'm not mentally ill. Many people do consider this the only real question of life, and Albert Camus would agree. He opens his book, The Myth of Sisyphus, with this statement: "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. All the rest, whether or not the world has 3 dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, come afterwards. These are games, one must first find answer." And if it is true, as Nietzsche claims, that a philosopher, to deserve our respect, must preach by example, you can appreciate the importance of that reply, for it will precede the definitive act. These are facts that the heart can feel, yet they call for careful study before they come clear to the intellect. See, Camus observed that the human condition is one of wanting to find meaning. There's ways that we want the world to be, right? We want it to be fair and just. We want to be rewarded for being hardworking and good people, and we want bad people to be punished accordingly. But the world doesn't seem to care much about our wishes for it. We live in a world that's unfair, where truly evil people do go unpunished, and horrendous things happen to the kindest and most innocent of us. And we're not able to make sense of it. This is the absurdity of life that we're all faced with. And then, what's the best way to deal with this? Well, you could kill yourself. But would that really solve the problem? Is there any more meaning in death than in life? Camus would say no. Suicide is then not a solution to the problem, but it's merely avoiding it. I guess you could find meaning then, deciding to believe in something and feeling meaningful through that approach. But Camus wouldn't be so sure that that would be a good answer either. Whatever meaning we give to our lives will be based on our own subjective preferences and opinion, and since there is no objective basis for these preferences, they're ultimately arbitrary and meaningless. Trying to impose meaning on the universe is, according to him, a recipe for disaster. Any significance we try to create will eventually be contradicted by the evidence and will crumble under the weight of its own absurdity. They deify what crushes them and find reason to hope in what impoverishes them. That forced hope is religious in all of them, he says. In the end, Camus concludes that the only sensible response to the question of the meaning of life is to say that there is none. Life is ultimately an absurd and purposeless affair. It may not be a comforting thought, but Camus believes that it's the only honest conclusion we can reach. Our lives are meaningless and they will remain so, which may seem a little bleak to most of us when we all know how empty and anxiety-ridden the feelings of absurdity are. Every day you wake up and you know you need to shower to get to work so you can go home after and eat and sleep so you can wake up the next day to work again. Every time your mind naturally aligns to try to find some meaning in all this toiling, but it won't find a meaning because there is no meaning. The universe remains completely indifferent to our want of a meaning. And maybe this depresses you. Maybe it makes you feel like numbing yourself with hours of gaming or binging a show to cope with the suffering of life. And I wouldn't blame you, but this type of escapism won't get you any happiness. Instead, if, as Camus imagines Sisyphus does, we take ownership and responsibility for our own lives, if we avoid false solutions and accept our conditions, we can establish purpose and even happiness in the face of absurdity. In this way, the absurd isn't something that should be feared or avoided. It's something to embrace. The absurd can be a positive force in this way because it's a reminder for us that our lives have value, even if they are ultimately meaningless. So, you choose to take the metro to work every day and ultimately accepting the futility of your punishment that is employment. And by doing so, you're reshaping your tragic fate. You're doing it with a smile on your face. Camus argues that we can become fully alive through choosing to acknowledge the hopelessness of human conditions and carrying on regardless. By approaching life with full consciousness and with vitality and intensity, and by becoming the masters of our own absurd fate. And this is how he answers the question of suicide, how we defy futility and establish what it means to live. We are condemned to absurdity by the human condition, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's only by confronting this absurdity and heroically carrying on in spite of it that a truly authentic life can be lived. Camus said, "You will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of, and you will never live life if you're looking for the meaning of life." And in many ways, this can lead to new ways of viewing your life and new ways of living your life. It's also by acknowledging the absurd that we can truly break free from the constraints of society and the beliefs that we hold about how the world is or what meaning, we could find in it. You may as well live your meaningless existence intensely, right? And defiantly. There's nothing holding you back, at least. In the awareness of how utterly pointless my existence is, I'm motivated to say yes to adventures, to experiences, and people I maybe otherwise might have deemed risky or too much or pointless. Camus said we should live to the point of tears, and I take that pretty seriously. Not to be dramatic, but once you sort of realize that pain isn't anything to be feared, and there really is no point to anything, it opens up a whole world of possibilities as well.